Okay, welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. I'm your host for today's program, Paul DeMain. Many of the stories viewed here can also be found at our website at www.indiancountrynews.com. Here's some of the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native American news sources. The Mescalero Apache Inn of the Mountain Gods has fired 4 top executives after filing documents indicating the resort could miss a $12 million interest payment on May 15th. Documents filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission say that unless the resort is able to finance $200 million in bond debt, they do not expect to have cash sufficient to pay the interest payment. The tribe took on notes at 12% interest in 2003 to complete construction of an enlarged inn and other projects. The $200 million in bonds mature November 15th, 2010. The luxury inn with 273 rooms and suites overlooking a lake has struggled to operate in the black despite the makeover and grand opening in 2005. The resort and its casino Apache, the crown jewels of the tribe's business enterprises, reported net losses of $28.4 million from May 2005 to the end of January 2008 and showed net income of $88,000 in the quarter that ended this January 31st, according to a SEC filed report. Federal prosecutors say they did not violate the due process rights of one of 2 men charged with the 1975 slaying of a Native woman on the Pine Ridge Reservation, so the judge should not dismiss the indictment. John Graham and Richard Marshall pled not guilty to charges they committed in December of 1975, the murder of Anime Piktuakwash. Their trial starts May 12th in Rapid City, South Dakota. Another man, Arlo Looking Cloud, has been convicted for his role in the murder and is now cooperating with federal authorities in the case. Marshall's attorney filed a motion last month to dismiss the charges because prosecutors earlier accused Looking Cloud of supplying the murder weapon, but now say Marshall provided it. Prosecutors say the defense is trying to create a discrepancy in the facts by mixing conduct at Marshall's house with what happened at the murder scene over 50 miles and hours apart. Respected elder and grandmother Catherine Wickersham Wade, 86, of Chickaloon, Alaska, passed peacefully into the spirit world on March 22nd, surrounded by her family members. Catherine was born at Old Man Lake near Chickaloon, Alaska. She and her late husband, Tiny, bought 40 acres of land near Moose Creek where they raised their family. She opened and ran the Moose Creek Drive-In from 1956 to 1976. Katie was instrumental in starting Alaska's first tribal school, Yanidaha, in 1995, and it received the High Honors Award from Harvard University in the year 2002. Funeral services for 2 respected elderly women of the Ojibwe Reservation are also in process. Mary Corbine White, also known as Mindamuye of Reserve, Wisconsin, passed away Saturday, March 21st. Mary was born in 1918 in Hayward, Wisconsin. She worked at the Omni Lab in New Post on the LCO Res and for Honeywell Corporation in Minneapolis, Minnesota. From time to time, she was very active in the LCO community. Mary, along with her husband of 57 years, James White, were strong supporters of the American Indian movement. She assisted with the 1971 Winter Dam takeover on the LCO reservation, where she was the first and very last person at the site. She also was an avid square dancer and loved to play bingo. She is survived by many relatives, including sons Fred and Mike Tribble, who began the legal litigation process in the 1970s that returned access to off-reservation hunting and fishing treaty rights of the Great Lakes Ojibwe. The brothers were cited for not having their name on a fishing shack several feet outside of the LCO reservation water boundary by Wisconsin state game wardens. The case became known as the Voigt case. Funeral services have also begun for Cookie Morrow of the Courte Reservation, who passed away on Monday, March 23rd. She was the elderly matriarch of many families on the LCO Reservation in northwest Wisconsin. More information on the scheduling of her services and that of Mary White will be announced locally over the next 24 hours. The Department of Justice Office on Violence Against Women announced it's now accepting applications for $23.6 million in OVW Recovery Act funds to assist tribal governments and Native coalitions to combat violence against women in tribal communities. The Indian Tribal Governments Program will award $20.8 million to grantees, while the Tribal Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Coalition Program will award $2.8 million. The Tribal Governments Program are designed to decrease the number of violent crimes committed against American Indian and Alaskan Native women, to help tribes use their independent authority to respond to crimes committed against Indian women, and to assure that those who commit violent crimes against women are held accountable. The Recovery Act funds will be used for victims' vocational and other educational programs and associated costs, housing and child care services, transportation, renovation of emergency shelters, and the hiring of personnel. Dr. Yvette Rabidou has been appointed by President Barack Obama as Director of Indian Health Service, Department of Health and Human Services. Rabidou is an assistant professor in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at the University of Arizona. She has conducted extensive research on American Indian health issues with a focus on diabetes and Alaskan Native and American Indian health policy. Rabidou previously worked in the Indian Health Services as a medical officer and clinical director on the San Carlos Reservation and in the Gila River Indian community. Rabidou, 46, is a member of the Rosebud Sioux. She received her MD from Harvard Medical School and her MPH from the Harvard School of Public Health. More than 150 supporters of the Narragansett tribe marched to the Rhode Island State House recently, protesting a U.S. Supreme Court decision that limits the tribe's ability to govern its own land free from state and local laws. That march and a rally targeted a February court decision that prevented the federal government from placing tribal land in trust for tribes such as the Narragansett that were federally recognized after Congress passed the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act. The case began in 1991 when the tribe purchased 31 acres in Charleston, Rhode Island to build elderly housing, and then applied to place it under federal trust. The governor and other state officials worried the Narragansett would create a tax-free zone, undercutting local businesses, or build a casino, which under state law is banned. Chief Matthew Thomas said the tribe would push Congress to change laws governing tribal lands and would work to elect sympathetic leaders in the area. Tribal elder Paul Dove Jennings said the Narragansett have welcomed all people to Rhode Island, beginning with the earliest settlers, but have not received the same respect back. It remains unclear how far-reaching the Supreme Court ruling will prove. Lawyers for the Native American Rights Fund, which provide legal representation to tribes, have said that dozens of tribes could be affected, while lawyers for Rhode Island argued the number was potentially in the hundreds. At the heart of the case is a 1934 law Congress passed to help tribes that lost millions of acres of land during a forced assimilation campaign that began in 1987 to get some of the land back. But the Supreme Court ruled that the Narragansett could not benefit from that particular act. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank our underwriters for helping with this broadcast, and you for joining with us. Come back soon again as well. Miigwech.